Happy Wisdom Wednesday, even though it's Thursday. Welcome to another Wisdom Wednesday episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. I'm Dr. Ben.
And I'm Dr. Susanna.
And we are both naturopathic doctors who empower you to heal yourself through your whole food, plant-based nutrition, as well as your mindset and understanding how the brain-body connection empowers you in your health. Today, I thought it would be cool to talk about mindfulness because I know that I hear this term, this idea. I mean, it's not new, right? This idea of mindfulness and cultivating mindfulness and engaging in mindfulness practices, being more mindful. I wanted to kind of unpack and explore this idea and address the notion of mindfulness as a practice, as opposed to what I see, cutting right to the chase here, I suppose, is that mindfulness is kind of synonymous with health. It's just the natural byproduct of living aligned with nature, fueling ourselves properly. Of course, physical health is the consequence of, fueling our body physically and being aligned with nature in all those sorts of ways. Mindfulness or peace or that clear state of mind is just the natural consequence of understanding who we are and who we're not. And from my perspective, it's not a practice, but our natural state. And remembering who we are, I guess we can create it into a practice, but we don't need to. So anyways, that's what I wanted to explore here today with you, Dr. Susanna. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, and just to kind of clarify, so really what you're wanting to explore is the difference between mindset practices, something, for example, like sitting down and meditating, or sitting down and doing gratitude practices, or maybe we could put yoga into this category, or you can put a lot of things into this category.
Well, I think that's the whole idea, is that, walking, journaling, gardening, cooking, eating, there's this idea that we create these we engage in life in a mindful sort of way.
Right. So, setting aside time to do mindfulness practices versus moving through life on a day-to-day basis from a mindful place.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I mean,
and it's interesting because actually I just went to probably the first yoga class I've been to in maybe 2 years this morning. And when you brought up this topic today, I thought, oh, that is so interesting, because I always remember hearing from so many yoga teachers, and I love it. I love what they're saying, which is that, yes, we can all show up on the mat, roll out the mat, and be here now for these 60 minutes or however long the class is. But the real yoga practice is what we bring into the world.
Yeah, what the heck does that mean?
Well, okay. So you're asking me what that means.
Well, I don't know. It's just, I guess a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be mindful in the world? And I guess the question, which is the title of the episode, do we need to do anything? Do we need to practice anything? Do we need to work on anything in order to be more mindful? And I guess the argument or the hypothesis that I'm bringing to the table here is that it's not so much of a doing of anything as it is an undoing of lots of things. And the undoing is undoing of the programming or the conditioning or this living in the delusional reality that we are our thoughts. We are our ego. We are, wrapped up in our story and our narrative. And having that understanding of our true nature, being the observer of our life, but not the active, engaged, immersed participant, but we're both. I personally don't feel as though there is a required practice to cultivate or experience that reality. I believe, in my experience, that's natural and innate. The way that I like to feel it and put it and speak it is that there's this awakening presence that's like, moving through us all. And I would, equate it to the healing potential that is also present with us all, moving our bodies into balance. The same or a similar force is moving us into awakening and awareness, deepening in our understanding of our true nature at any and every moment. And we don't need to sit down or stand up or walk this way or engage in this practice to experience that. We can just be in life and be aware of that presence moving through us and identify and attune more to that, as opposed to, again, our kind of story.
Yeah. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with having a mindfulness practice that's carved out of your day.
Yeah.
But, I really love you brought up this great kind of metaphor.
Yeah. As we were kind of, before we were sitting down, I was kind of describing or comparing like mindfulness as a practice to exercise as a practice of creating fitness. Fitness, physical fitness and physique and strength doesn't have to come from an exercise routine or a gym membership. We can just move about our lives and have an active lifestyle, move our bodies in ways that we enjoy, and experience physical fitness. The same goes for mindfulness. We don't have to subscribe to the Calm app or the Insight timer or any sort of yoga journal or podcast or yoga class subscription or anything like that to quote unquote cultivate more mindfulness. Mindfulness just comes from being in life with an understanding of who we truly are, and which is, of course, one could say, a practice, a continual, perpetual practice, remembering and remembering again as we forget and forget and forget again our true nature. We don't need to do anything, even though I think the hard thing is we're told by, in so many ways, society at large is telling us, or I at least experience or witness, that there's this narrative that we do need to do these mindfulness practices. We do need to work on ourselves. We do need to do any number of things, fill in the blank, in order to be more peaceful.
Yeah. Well, with this metaphor, really got me thinking about how sometimes you do see that if people do start like an exercise regimen or routine, or they start going to like a specific class where they're moving a lot, it's like they get all their movement done in 30 minutes or an hour, then the rest of the day they're like sedentary, right? That's kind of a common thing in our society here. You could say, oh, does that same thing happen if someone sits in meditation for 30 minutes and then the rest of the day they're kind of not mindful? But I think that one benefit, and I just want to like acknowledge the benefits of these practices, is that, like, I know from my experience when I started, I guess I've always been kind of an active person, but I see a lot of people who might start up being more active by having a structured class. And then through getting used to like how good it feels to have that movement, they start naturally being more active throughout the rest of their day. And so I think that the same could be said with a specific structured mindfulness practice. Kind of opens them up to seeing how they can be this way in the rest of the day. So there's certainly a benefit, but I hear also really what you're saying, Ben, is that we don't need it. We don't need it. And what's coming up for me is actually, I'm really remembering that when you and I started dating, you had a very kind of aggressive or rigid, or I should say disciplined meditation practice, where it was almost like you needed it and you like depended on it.
Yeah.
And I remember you actually made the conscious decision to let go of the practice. Do you want to share the story, the experience?
Sure. I'd like to first comment on something that you brought up that brought up something in me, which is the distinction between the intrinsic versus the extrinsic motivation and inspiration. And you were talking about exercise. Sometimes when people are getting into exercise, a little bit of extrinsic motivation is helpful, and then it becomes intrinsic. Then it's like, oh, it feels really good to move my body the way it was designed to move. And translating that same phenomenon to mindfulness, a lot of people don't know how good it feels to be peaceful because stress has become kind of a default state. And I think a lot of people have become, addicted to the physiologic stress response and the drama of life. So engaging, having a little bit of extrinsic motivation, the insight timer, whatever meditation app or class or whatever, to kind of like nudge someone into that. And then it's like, oh, being present, being mindful feels good. It's just common sense. And that's, of course, not to say that we're going to spend 100% of our waking moments in a quote unquote state of mindfulness, whatever the heck that would look like. But it just becomes like a common sense thing where we always like to, connect with that intrinsic motivation, because really what that means is we are free. We're free from our self-criticism. We're free from our judgment. We're free from our willpower and the forcing that we might otherwise do to motivate ourselves, outwardly, and judge ourselves and think that we need to do something better or more or whatever. And we're just connected with that flow of intrinsic inspiration that moves us in accordance with what's in our highest good.
Yeah. So then speak to your experience with letting go meditation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because I loved meditating and felt great meditating and kind of had like a sense of pride for my meditation practice. And I loved that time that I would create for myself. And still I felt like, on edge and just kind of irritable or just not as peaceful as I wanted to be. And
I'm curious, how was your day if you if like your meditation got like disrupted, or like you had to get up early to catch a plane and you couldn't do your meditation or
that
something?
honestly never happened.
Oh.
Because I even while I was in yoga teacher training, when we'd have our 6 a.m. or like a 6 a.m. yoga class every single day, I'd wake up at 5 and do my yoga before my full day of yoga teacher training, like yoga and just I was, like you said, very disciplined. But I was also, again, like I said, not so peaceful, largely due to the fact that I had a lot of negative self-talk and judgment and rigid thinking and criticism, self-criticism that
meditation was trying to fix.
I wasn't even aware of that being the case. But I think the fact is that no amount of meditation could have fixed that. That's not something that is fixable in any other way other than just having that insight of that negative self-talk, and then of course insight of thoughts and thinking and the perception at large that we as human beings create, and being able to kind of like unplug from that, separate from that, see that for what it is, but also see it for what it's not, and just be more aware of the truth of who I am, which is not that. And I guess what also helped me kind of sustain my disconnected relationship with mindfulness practices and meditation, not that they're bad or wrong, or but I don't feel like I need them, which to me is freedom. I don't feel like I need them, just the same way I don't feel like I need a gym to be strong.
Right. But I want to interject.
Yeah.
By like saying that sometimes you do feel intrinsically inspired to sit down and meditate. I've seen you do it a few times in the last year. But it's not coming from this place of like, well, I need to do this because I'm a person who meditates and I'm going to beat myself up if I don't meditate today, right? It comes from this intrinsic place of I want to.
It generally comes from a place of feeling overstimulated, and I want to disconnect with that stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I interrupted you.
I don't know where the heck I was going.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think I was going nowhere fast. But in any event, I think that the moral of that story is that, like, one thing that came out of my mouth that I think I'm glad that I said is that no amount of meditation or any sort of practice was going to create the self-compassion and self-love that I already am. It's like the awareness of, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the path to self-love and enlightenment or like awakening, whatever, I think is a big scam and a big delusion. The fact is that we already are in our essence perfect, whole, complete, self-compassionate, loving, amazing beings. And our thinking, our judgments, our desire to be better, which is just perfectly imperfectly part of the human experience, that is not going anywhere. And we can be human, we can be judgmental, we can have these judgmental thinking thoughts and thought storms and upsets and discontent and just grudges and all the ickiness that comes part of as part of the human experience. We can have all of that, and also at the very same time identify with what's beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
What's the place that from which that experience arises, along with all the positive experiences, along with everything between. It all arises from our true nature, which is beyond our human experience. So I don't know, just more blah, blah, blahs about how mindfulness as a practice or no practice, at least in my experience, led to any sort of, led me very far. And that discovery is it's because it's already there. It's already who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, I think I'd like to just share a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Because I used to be a big practice person, lots of practices. And certainly a lot of my practices came from a place of wanting to improve myself. But now I relate to you in the sense that I feel very free, that I don't have to do any practice to be a better person or anything like that. And I really relate to everything that you've said about just how wonderful and free it is to just move through the day with the mindfulness. And I guess what that means to me when we're using this word, and it's like, well, what does that mean? It's like remembering, having the awareness of where the human experience is coming from, that it comes from our thoughts, that we are not our thoughts. And as Eckhart Tolle says, like remembering that we're the soul, identifying with the soul and not identifying with our thoughts. And of course, we're not going to remember that in every single moment of every single day, but having that kind of thread behind everything in the day, even if we're not like consciously mindful of it in that moment, is a really, I feel like, a very free place to be living from. But it's interesting because I feel like in this conversation, what's come up for me is like, well, yeah, that sounds great and everything. But for example, it's like before you had that insight, Ben, or before I had the insight of like, I don't have to fix myself. And we are perfect. We are, at our core, we are peaceful and we don't have to fix ourselves. Like before having that insight, how do you like, quote unquote, get there? Like, what do you do to like get there? And really what you've been saying is you don't have to do anything. You don't have to sit in meditation. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. But I think it could be, like someone listening to this conversation could still be like, well, yeah, but like, I don't feel like how you feel, Ben. What do I do to feel like that? And
stop judging yourself. Stop wanting things to be different. That very statement, that very desire, even though it's purely like coming from a place of wanting to feel good and it's genuine, that very desire is creating more separation from true nature.
Yeah, it really comes to understanding the truth of who we are, and as I said before, what creates the human experience.
So I mean, I think what it is, the journey, if you will, as has been said thousands of times by, brilliant, wise souls, is like the journey from the intellectual understanding, the understanding that comes from these conversations, the understanding that comes from reading and listening, and our human thoughts, like that intellectual understanding. That's one step into the journey. And then the next step into the journey is the embodiment of that and the actualization of that on a deeper level, which, I think it's like two-step. It's like one step, two-step, but the second step, the embodiment step, is perpetually deepening and expanding. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
but I think a lot of people do get stuck in the intellect, and then their intellect tries to get them out of their intellect, when in fact the way to get out of the intellect and transcend into that second step, I don't know why I'm using 1 and 2, but the second step is not through more intellect. It's not through more thinking. It's through more being, which of course isn't anything that is really we're able to, talk to, because when we're talking and communicating, all we're doing is living in intellect land. And I guess now that I'm talking it out more, I'm having the experience and insight that that's why practices where you're quiet, where you're still, where you're observing, is essentially, it's identifying more with our embodiment process, more with our soul process, and less with the intellectual thing. That's why, like, reading, like listening to music and stuff is a very different experience than reading a book or listening to an audiobook. Because listening to an audiobook, we're going to be listening and grasping the words and turning on our intellect. When we're listening to sound healing, like meditations or something like that, we're allowing our intellect to kind of, like, get out of the way so that we can more directly move into the embodiment phase. Anyway, I feel like we could talk on and on about this sort of stuff, but any last parting words, Dr. Susanna?
I don't think so.
I guess at this point we're just going to be, and maybe encourage you to do the same, or to be the same. No, do it. But on that note, if you would like to be in the energy of more conversation around mind's thought, consciousness, and our human nature and divine nature, you can join us in weekly Peace on Earth calls that happen every week on Zoom, and you can find out more at www.alter.health, and the Peace on Earth page will get you all you need to know. It's on a sliding scale, so you can kind of jump in at any number of investments that work for you. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Yep. Bye for now. We hope you enjoy your weekend.